Okay, guys, I'll get everyone. We'll get everyone started here. Welcome to our welcome to the virtual office. This is the first time we're doing one of these on Zoom. Okay, so first we'll start off with our market conditions. You know, as you guys are probably aware, the market has been a really strong seller's market. You know, markets always fluctuate, even within a seller's market or a buyer's market. We still see market fluctuations. You know, seasonal market fluctuations. Generally speaking, when you hit, you know, right around Halloween up until somewhere around April, we have the definitive market slowdown. But outside of that, though, obviously, from there's a couple year cycle of a buyer's market and seller's market. And again, just simple supply and demand is what dictates the buyer's market and the seller's market. When inventory exceeds demand, you have your buyer's market, you have more people trying to sell their homes and people competing for those homes, and prices will either remain steady or come down. In a seller's market, obviously, you have demand exceeding inventory, and then that obviously puts your sellers in a much stronger negotiation position. Really, from around COVID up until very recently, we've had a really solid seller's market, almost a historic seller's market. And as you guys probably are already aware, there's been bidding wars. So what's going on right now? First of all, we've had this massive spike in interest rates. The massive spike in interest rates is absolutely driving down demand. There are far fewer buyers out there right now than there were, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 months ago. This is, when I explain it to people, it's almost shocking at what an impact the interest rates have on a buyer's buying power. And I have the example down here. I'm going to skip to the next slide. And so you can actually see, where is it here? You can actually see, if you guys want, I can share this PowerPoint with everyone here also. I printed it out for people in the office. But if you guys want, I can share this with you virtually email. But if you look at the mortgage calculator, in January this year, if you can afford $2,000 a month, and that's what mortgage brokers actually approve people for. They don't approve you for the total loan amount. They approve you for what you can afford per month based upon your income and your current debt level. And so if you could afford a $2,000 a month payment, not including taxes, you could qualify for a $465,000 mortgage in January. Right now, interest rates are hovering right around 7%. That $2,000 a month payment only gets you $300,000 loan. So buyers from January to now, if you're in the $550,000, $600,000 price range, you've lost $160,000 in buying power. I mean, that is a tremendous amount of buying power to lose, and that's one of the things that is driving demand downward. That and there's some uncertainty with the economy right now, but more than anything, it's the interest rates. Why haven't prices dropped precipitously here? That comes down to our supply. So the supply level right now is at historic lows. And when you have historic low supply, obviously the drop in demand is not going to have as big an impact as a market that has, almost, unlimited supply. If you look at other places around the country where we've seen these housing booms, Florida, the Carolinas, Las Vegas, Arizona, those places are already in a housing recession. They've already seen a strong drop in prices, but because of the supply issue here, it hasn't happened. Even in the 2007-2008 market, when we had the housing collapse, we only dropped 10-15% in home value here, whereas in some other parts of the country saw even as high as a 50% price drop. So we're never going to see as big a price drop here as we'd see in other places. But we are starting to see a softening of the market, right? The way we quantify a seller's market or a buyer's market is this thing we call absorption rate. This is how long it takes for the current inventory to sell off, and the kind of the threshold for a buyer's market and a seller's market is a 5. What that means is if you took the entire inventory that is currently on the market and you looked at how many houses are selling per month, how many months would it take to sell off our entire inventory? And so if it takes 5 months to sell off the entire inventory, that's a market equilibrium. Anything less than 5 months is a seller's market. Anything more than 5 months is a buyer's market. And you can see right here, we're still in solid seller's market territory, despite the fact that interest rates have spiked. Now, this is September data. So that September data is a little slightly outdated. We haven't seen the October numbers come out yet. My guess is that absorption rate is going to start to rise and will probably be in a buyer's market within the next few months. So obviously, if you guys are buyers, that is a positive thing. The negative aspect of it, though, is you're going to be paying more in interest rates. So it's kind of it's a catch-22 there. But we're definitely headed into the buyer market territory. In fact, if you look at, I have Suffolk, Nassau, and Queens County here, just a little bit of data here. You can see the median price and the number of homes being sold. You can see in Suffolk, we peaked out in the price increase, year-over-year price increase in March, April, and May. So for instance, if you look at the chart here, I have my arrow on here. What this means is that homes sold in March of 2022 were approximately 12.4% more, in terms of sales price than what they sold in March 2021. Then you go to 12.6, 11.2. That is an incredibly strong price growth. Then you can see starting around May, June, we start to see the drop in the percent change. So we're definitely on a downward trend. And again, my guess is going forward, we're going to probably see these numbers continue to go down and possibly even hit negative territory where housing prices are now coming down. Again, these numbers are a little dated because the sales price is reflective of a home that's, if it sells in September, that means it probably went into contract in July. If it sold in August, it probably went into contract in June. And so again, right now, we may already be in negative territory. That's kind of at least a sense we get, anecdotal sense we get. So we might be in negative territory now, but again, these numbers are 2 months behind because it takes about 2 months to go from, getting into contract and actually closing on the property. So again, definitely a decline here in Suffolk County. You can see we go from, 12% year-over-year growth. We're down to, 4%, 4.8%. You go to Nassau County, similar thing. We peaked out in June, almost 12% growth, down to 5.2%. Queens, the market hasn't been as strong. You can see the peak was actually a little bit earlier, and so this decline in sales price actually started much earlier than Nassau and Suffolk County. And then you can see in September, we actually had negative growth. So the median home price in Queens for September actually went down. The other category, the other chart here, graph here, is the number of sold homes. And once again, you can see the negative growth in the sold homes. That's once again indicative of a inventory shortage. And that's why we see actually fewer homes being sold year over year. Okay, so how much a price is going to come down? How fast are they going to drop? It's really impossible to predict. But again, just from my anecdotal experience and the anecdotal experience of other agents who work through, my office, and also we have an attorney here who's going to get into the legal side of buying and selling in a few minutes. Everyone's anecdotal experience is that we are seeing prices come down. For instance, I have a listing in East Northport right now. If this were 4 or 5 months ago and I put it on the market for what we originally listed it as, I probably would have had about 15, 20, 25 couples come through the first open house. Probably would have had multiple offers and possibly even above asking within the first week. We're now it's been on the market for 7 weeks. We've done a price drop. We do have an offer, but the offer is lower than what we're asking right now, and so we're negotiating the difference, which is typical of a more traditional market or even a buyer's market right now. And again, the house is definitely comped out to be priced where it should be. It's just a different market right now. So we're anticipating prices will come down, fractionally, or it's already happening right now. But again, it's impossible to predict. Now, in terms of, I know some of you guys are buying, some of you guys are selling. By the way, if you have any questions, just please, chime in. In terms of sales price of the home, obviously you have the home that you're selling, the location, the number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms. Part of selling your home and getting the most amount of money for it is pricing it appropriately. And I'll talk about the different pricing strategies from a seller's market to a buyer's market. And that also impacts my buyers here too. And then obviously promoting the home, advertising the home, and getting as many people into the home as you can possibly get. Those of you who are selling the home, a lot of people don't want to put money into a home they're about to sell. And so what can you do in order to increase the sale value of your home? The absolute number one thing you can do is clean, organize, and declutter. Get rid of old furniture. Any large, bulky furniture, definitely take out of rooms. Rooms that you're not using, get as much furniture out as you can. You still want it to look lived in, but you do not want it to look overwhelming. If you have too much furniture, the size of the house it feels much smaller, and it actually will impact how much money you can get for the house. If you have hardwood floors, get rid of the carpets and redo the hardwood floors. It's a cheap, easy way to really make the home look bigger, make the home look cleaner. And especially if you have pets or someone in the house smokes, get rid of those old carpets, because when people walk into a home, one of the biggest turnoffs for home buyers is if there's some type of an odor in the house. People are afraid that they're not going to be able to get rid of the odor, and that it turns, it's a non-starter for a lot of buyers, even if they love the house otherwise. You want to depersonalize the house. You don't want to overdo it. You don't have to take all your pictures down, but definitely take, don't have, don't overdo your family in the house. What you want to do is you want people to make an emotional connection to the house. One of the amazing things about buying a home is it's one of the most emotional decisions we're ever going to make. And so when people go into homes, they're thinking with their emotional part of the brain, not their logic part of the brain. And so if you have a house that you can't envision your family living in it, again, it turns people off. And then finally, if you have people seeing your house, your best bet is to leave the house. The last thing buyers want to do is get a tour of the house from the homeowner, because then emotionally they feel like they're touring your house instead of being able to put themselves emotionally into the house themselves. And so it's always better not to have the owner there. The buyers can feel like they can be honest with each other when they're talking about the house, and it's much easier for them to make that emotional connection without having the seller there. And then last but not least, inexpensive way is to paint the house. Once again, especially if you have a smoker in the house, painting the house makes it smell clean. It freshens up, scuff marks, and it's a very affordable way to maximize your sale price. Necessary repairs, anything that is a safety or health hazard, absolutely fix before you list the house. And the reason for that is you're going to probably have to do it when the inspector comes through anyway. If you have a leaky pipe, oil tank leak, broken windows, exposed wires, all of these things you're going to wind up having to do anyway. So you might as well do it before you sell the house. That way you can maximize the price you get for the house instead of paying for it after the fact, and not getting that benefit from showing the house in a much better order. Again, I already mentioned that, to finally get out. When your home is being shown, don't linger around. Okay, listing price. Again, the listing price is one of the most important decisions you can make. This is one of the reasons people hire real estate agents, is because we give them good advice on what a house should be listed at. There's no one correct pricing strategy. Pricing strategy oftentimes comes from market conditions or anticipated market conditions. The pricing strategy, you use recently sold homes, which we call comparables or comps for short. You look at what has sold in the neighborhood. On Long Island in particular, the most important thing is school district. You could literally have one house that's almost identical to a house 2 blocks away, but if they happen to be 2 blocks separated by a school district border, the price difference could be as high as 20–25% price difference. And so you're going to look at homes sold in a particular neighborhood in the same school district with similar features. Most important thing, approximate size, square footage, and number of bedrooms. In a competitive seller's market, you want to anticipate prices continuing to go up. In a buyer's market or a falling market, you want to anticipate prices going down. The biggest mistake you can make in a market right now is prices are beginning to soften and come down. You don't want to list high. And then when you list high, what happens is you wind up chasing the declining home prices. And you're never quite reaching where the price should be. And so selling the house in a much slower fashion, as prices drop, you wind up netting far less money than you could net had you priced it appropriately from the get-go. It's very difficult to make a decision and list the price at a lower number because you feel like you're leaving money on the table. But in reality, pricing it appropriately, even if it means pricing at a lower number, ultimately will help you net more of profit. Again, this is kind of what I went through. In a typical seller's market, and again, for my buyers here, this is going to be, this is an important aspect. In a typical seller's market, what the pricing strategy generally is you're going to price aggressively. So if the homes of a with similar features are selling for, let's say, $700,000, you want to list at about $700,000, and you're probably going to get a ton of traffic. You're going to get multiple people putting offers in, and you're most likely going to get a bidding war. And with a bidding war, what happens is you tell the buyers, I want everyone's best and final by a certain time and day. By telling everyone we want your best and final by a certain time and day, you're in essence making them compete against each other in a silent auction. In a silent auction like that, people are going to have to bid as much as they're willing to pay for the house, which almost guarantees you're going to get the most that someone's willing to pay for the house. In a more traditional market, which we're moving into now, and this is what the pricing strategy for most real estate agents is now, is you're going to list the house, and I have it right over here. You're going to list the house slightly above what the fair market value is. Not a lot, because if you go too much, you're not going to get the traffic. You're not going to get people coming in. So you're going to list the price slightly above what the home is worth, maybe 6% above what the comparable homes dictate. And then a buyer's going to come in, they're going to like the house, they're going to put an offer in slightly below what the home is worth. And then you go back and forth, you list at 700, they come in at 675, you come down to 695, they come up to 680, and you slowly kind of then arrive at that equilibrium in the middle. And that's kind of the market we're in right now. If you're overpricing the house, obviously it's going to sit there, you're not going to get the traffic. If you underprice the home, in a seller's market, you can't underprice the home because you're going to get a bidding war. But in a market like this, if you underprice the home, then you could be leaving money on the table. And so from a buying standpoint, if this were 5-6 months ago, when you go into these homes to view them, you have to expect that the home is going to sell at or above asking price. That's no longer happening. If someone prices their home really aggressively, you may see that happen, but most houses now are no longer bidding wars, and most houses now are no longer going above asking. So when you see home prices listed now, you can expect to pay, what the listing price is, or even slightly lower, depending upon how long it's been on the market. If it's a brand new listing, it may go closer to the listing price. If something's been on the market for 6-8 weeks now, which is now actually normal, then you could probably get it for below asking. And again, in a multiple offer situation, it's going to come down to who's willing to pay more. But more than that, it's also going to come down to the type of financing that the buyer has. This still holds true for the market we're in now. The better the financing, the sweeter the deal is for the buyer. And oftentimes you may actually see buyers take a lower offer with better financing conditions. And the big thing is, number one, is what type of a down payment are you going to put down? And when I get into the mortgage process, I'll talk more about that. I have love letters on here. This was very common during a seller's market. A love letter is when you have a buyer writes a letter to the homeowner, how much they love the house, and they have a picture of them and their beautiful 3 kids and how the kids are going to love playing in the backyard. And it was a very common thing to do in order to help the seller connect with the potential buyer when you have multiple offers. Maybe that can put them over the top and help them get the house. But the state has actually recommended we don't present love letters to sellers because it's a violation of fair housing. By having pictures in particular of the family may put the listing agent and even the seller at risk if they're looking now at the race of the buyer, the color of the buyer, the family status of the buyer, and those types of things. Okay, and then finally, for selling a house, the last in one of the critical pieces is advertising the house. The purpose of advertising is obviously to get more traffic into the house. 4 months ago, 5 months ago, was probably less important because everyone was on Zillow every day and on Truly every day and getting emails from the real estate agents every day. And these are all the listings. And so, there was so much competition out there. Traffic into your home was not that difficult to get. Now, though, it's much more difficult to get people into your house. And so, social media advertising and traditional mail advertising are always effective. The beauty of social media advertising is you can target specific groups of people coming from certain areas. So for instance, if you're selling a house in, let's say, East Northport, you can actually look up and see where most people who are moving to East Northport are coming from. And then you can social media target to that particular part of, let's say, Western Nassau or Queens County. And you can then know exactly, who you're targeting and also get immediate feedback on exactly who is looking at your ads, because you can see how many people have clicked on your ads. Again, U.S. mail advertising is still effective for the local community, but it's impossible to quantify how many people are actually looking at your advertisements and your data. And then finally, obviously, you want professional photographer, and if you have a beautiful, unique location, like in a village or on the water, it's always a good idea to have drone footage of the aerial shot of your homes. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. Does anyone have any questions on the buying side, the selling side? Okay. In terms of buying, okay, so the first step, if you're interested in buying at some point in the future, is you have to speak to a lender. Getting a pre-approval is absolutely essential. In fact, some homeowners actually won't even allow a buyer into their house unless they have a pre-approval. This was not the norm before COVID, but during COVID, in order to keep traffic down, most sellers began requiring a pre-approval just to schedule a showing of the home. While COVID is now hopefully in our rearview mirror, many homeowners are actually continuing with that requirement. Some real estate agents will also require a pre-approval. It depends on what brokerage is involved. My brokerage does not require pre-approval to show buyers a home, but some do. So absolutely get your pre-approval from the get-go. And just from your own standpoint, it'll then let you know exactly how much you can afford. And so that way you kind of know what communities and what houses you can look at. In this market, you really need to get a pre-approval update relatively often, because with interest rates rising, if you have a pre-approval from 2 or 3 months ago, you very well might not qualify for the same number anymore. And so obviously, if you want to be able to continue to look at homes you can afford. And so a regularly updated pre-approval will save you a lot of time and effort if you can no longer afford a particular number. Likewise, once you have an accepted offer once you have put an offer on a property, no offer is even going to be considered unless you have pre-approval. Now, how much should that pre-approval be for? In this market, first of all, you always want a pre-approval that has been issued recently. Again, if I have, I'll give you an example. I have a listing right now in East Northport. We had a pre-approval for an offer come in. The pre-approval was for $650,000. The pre-approval was from in mid-September. And so I asked the agent who put the offer in, can I have an updated pre-approval? And lo and behold, that number dropped significantly from the 650 number. The second thing is if you're putting an offer in this market, ideally what you want to do is only have the pre-approval for what you're offering on the property. So when you put an offer in, get a new pre-approval that's reflective of what you're offering and also how much the taxes are, because you because it's moving it towards a buyer's market, you don't want to let them know how much you can afford above what you're actually offering. In a seller's market, though, you want the pre-approval for as high as possible because you're competing against other buyers who may be a better deal if they know that they qualify for more and therefore are more likely to actually procure the mortgage. And so in this market, you want to get a new pre-approval for each offer you put in and only have it for how much you are going for. Now, in terms of the options, you have, obviously there's different types of mortgage, products out there. The best, obviously, is if you're putting an offer in, you want to put as much money down as possible because that makes your offer stronger. People are hesitant when you don't have the full 20% down for a conventional loan. In a seller's market 4 or 5 months ago, if you didn't have the 20% down, it was practically impossible to get an accepted offer because there were many other buyers with better financing conditions. But in today's market, it is possible to get offers accepted with less than your conventional 20% down. So conventional will be 20% down. You also have to account for approximately 7.5% closing costs. We say 7.5%. Sometimes it's lower than that, but you always want to have enough money to close. A loan with mortgage insurance, you still need a minimum of 5% down. And that is also closing costs going to be about 7.5%, maybe a little bit more with PMI. And then an FHA loan, you only need to have 3.5% down. And again, you're going to need your closing costs. If a buyer doesn't have enough cash to close, there's always an option of a seller's concession. Again, 5-6 months ago, seller's concession, you were never getting an offer accepted. With this new market, it's becoming more common again. And that's where the seller actually gives money to the buyer to help cover closing costs. And then that extra money that the seller is giving to the buyer just gets wrapped up in the buyer's mortgage. So the seller's not actually paying the closing costs. The buyer's mortgaging more than they're paying for the house, and then getting that money back at closing so that they can cover the closing costs. That's legal. It's relatively common. And the only problem becomes is the house has to appraise now for more than the buyer is paying for it. Okay, so what's next? Once an offer is accepted, you then have 2 to 4 days, usually, to get an inspection. Buyer and seller both, it's in their best interest to have the inspection done quickly. And then figure from 4 to 8 days after that, you have the attorneys going to get in contact with each other. The seller's attorney is going to write the contract, go over the terms and conditions with the buyer's attorney. Once they agree to those things in terms of, closing dates and things of that nature, it gets sent to the buyer's attorney. The buyer signs it first. They send it back to the seller's attorney. Seller then sends it. Contracts then go back to the buyer and seller, and the buyer can then start the mortgage process. Buyer can't do anything until they have that executed contract. Then once that happens, the mortgage process begins. First, you're going to have an appraisal to make sure the home is worth what you're paying for it. Next, you're going to have a title search. Your attorney will order the title search to make sure there's no outstanding liens on the property. They're going to do a survey. The bank will issue a commitment letter. Bank will issue a clear to close. And you figure this whole process from the accepted offer to closing is somewhere from 6 to 10 weeks. I'm going to turn it over now to our attorney, Mike DeBello, and he's going to talk about the legal aspects of the process.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? I assume that's yes.
Yep. I hope so.
Okay, great. All right, so
I think Zoom only has about 10 minutes left on it, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this won't take long. This is really the interesting and exciting part of the program. Hopefully I won't put any of you to sleep. All right, so from a legal perspective, for the sellers out there, what would really help to expedite the deal, as Chris mentioned, you're looking at approximately 6 to 8 weeks. That's if all goes well. but there's certain things that a seller can do to help really move that along quickly, and that's getting the paperwork to the attorney ahead of time. Usually the attorneys are the last to know, about the property and the sale. But what I always tell my sellers is that if you can locate the deed, I know it's probably been, a few years since you purchased the house, but get the deed, get a copy of the title policy. Most people don't even know what that is, but you should have received a title policy from your attorney when you closed. And a survey is very helpful because most buyers will be doing a survey. And if your survey is up to date and you haven't made a lot of changes, that will help save the buyer some money. It's also a very good negotiating. Sometimes, it's also very helpful and can be offered in good faith to the buyer. C of O's, we'll talk about C of O's, but hopefully you have a C of O for the dwelling and for any improvements that you made. Very important documents, the deed, the policy, and the survey if you have, and C of O's. Who's in title? Basically, that means who is the owner of the property, the owner of record. That is could be, the husband and wife, could be a person who inherited the property through an estate. And if you did inherit it, then we'll have to get letters testamentary and court approval, which basically can be used to show that the heir has legal ownership to the property. The other situation that we come across too is sometimes it's a divorce. That always complicates things a little bit, especially if it's a contested divorce. But again, it's always helpful to know these issues going into the sale. C of O's are one of the most common issues when selling a home. Does the seller have the appropriate certificates of occupancy for the home and the improvements? And the improvements can be anything from as complicated and as involved as an addition, as an extension, a garage conversion. Those are the more complicated ones. The easy ones are sheds and decks. Easier, I should say, because they don't require plumbing and electrical, which is what really takes time if you do not have a certificate of occupancy for the additions or extensions. Pools also require C of O's. And the other common issues that we see are permits. Sometimes sellers begin projects and they never finish them. Permits need to be closed out, and eventually they should lead to a CO or a certificate of compliance. Lastly, you want to make sure that there are no violations, because all of these fall on the seller. Unless you have a really, really motivated buyer who's willing to take it as is, or if it's a builder who doesn't really care, then these can easily be assumed by the buyer, developer, investor. But in most situations, the seller will have to deal with these issues, and that's why it's important to get them on the table at the very beginning before you go into contract. Actually, even before you list the property, it's always very helpful if you can get these to your attorney and the broker working on these. The other big challenge about selling is the on or about date. I always tell my sellers and buyers, I have no control over the on or about date. It's specifically an on or about date because of the domino effect. Everyone is waiting on somebody else. Sellers are waiting on their sellers because they're going to be, either buying or moving somewhere, and they have to coordinate their closing of their sale with their purchase. So that's from the the seller's perspective. From a buyer's perspective, they have to wait for the sellers to be able to get out. So there are ways to address this. And again, I always like to get in front of the issue and find out where is the seller going. Does the purchaser need to sell? That's important too. Sometimes they do a sale and a buy transaction, which is the worst, because it's just from a logistical perspective, it's very, very difficult to coordinate